Hello and welcome to the Connecticut Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. My name is Adam Wood and I'm the president and founder of the chamber, along with my colleagues Deborah Cavanis of Bridgeport and Dan Glissman of Hartford. To find out more about us, please check us out at ctcannabischamber.org. Today we're hosting a roundtable conversation on banking and finance in the cannabis industry. Despite a lot of progress over the past decade, the cannabis industry still struggles to access a fundamental piece of the US economy, the financial system. Access to capital is expensive and hard to get, and once you have it, many banks won't let you make a deposit. Although 18 states have fully legalized cannabis, it's still a sticky issue for banks and other financial institutions because it remains illegal at the federal level. In fact, only 518 of the nearly 5,000 commercial banks in the United States reported having served the cannabis industry in 2021. Our guests are DCP Commissioner Andrea Comer, Megan Budd of Withum, an industry-leading accounting firm, Lynn Giroux of Essex Savings Bank, and Kevin Hart of Green Check Verified. We're so thankful to each of you, each of our participants today for joining us. Please tell us about the work that you do and what your experience has been dealing with businesses in the cannabis industry and the challenges that they face with respect to banking and finance.
Okay, well, thank you, Adam, and it's a pleasure to be amongst this august body here. You got a powerhouse group, so this is going to be fun. So I started Green Check along with my co-founders back in 2017 after having been approached to build a point-of-sale system for the cannabis industry based upon my enterprise background. And the more I learned while I was doing the research of that, the more I found out that the real challenge for the cannabis industry, this is going back 2016 or so before we incorporated the company, was access to financial services. And that's not just depository accounts, it's that full broad spectrum of financial and business services. And that became a much more interesting puzzle to solve. So that was the genesis for Green Check Verified. We decided that we're going to take a data-focused approach. Financial institutions do not make decisions on anything without data, so we knew we had to have the data. The biggest challenge was, the way I like to summarize it, to keep it simple, is how do they know they're letting good money in and keeping bad money out? That is a data challenge, and understanding not only your customers, but your customers' customers, suppliers, et cetera. So we created a platform that connects the cannabis industries, the businesses, with the financial institutions and allows them each to scale. And as of today, we have over 100 different financial institutions operating in 38 states, also in Guam, Saipan, and Puerto Rico, and on Native American reservations as well, too. Connected to over 2,500 unique cannabis businesses, and we average over $400 to $500 million a month in verified sales deposited into the US banking system. Now, those are great numbers. We are the leader in the space, but that also means the industry is still grossly underserved. And so that challenge still exists.
Lynn, tell us about Essex Savings Bank and the work that you did there.
So here's where you get the lone wolf, so to speak. We developed our cannabis program on our own back in 2014. I handle all of the operations of the bank, the deposit side, retail. And when we were approached way back then by a particular MRB, marijuana related business, they, as Kevin notes, had a big struggle in finding a bank. And our bank, once I spoke to our senior management team and the board of directors, felt that it was more important to have this industry be transparent in its transactions, and that we were actually helping them forget the moral side of life, because everybody has their own perspective on cannabis. But we felt it was really important to bank them. And luckily we had the FDIC in our house at the time for an exam when we were building this program, and we were able to bounce things off of them. I think anyone on this call would say that the FDIC and the state, they are like Switzerland. They're not going to condone anything. They're not going to condemn any program, but it better have belts and suspenders. So that's what we've aimed to do with our program, and we're thoughtful in it. We are a community bank that services the lower Connecticut shoreline, so we don't have a big footprint, but we do feel this is important.
Megan, tell us about Withum and what you're doing there in accounting.
Sure. Thanks, Adam. So yeah, I recently joined Withum. I've been in the cannabis industry for a few years now. My previous experience is not in that, but I had an opportunity to join Cannabis and really just fell in love with the industry. At Withum, we work with a range of cannabis operators from initial startups all the way to larger public companies. One of my reasons for moving over was my desire to really help work with startups, especially with my home state of Connecticut going legal and being connected to this industry and really wanting to be a part of it. So I jumped on this opportunity. Withum has done an extensive amount of work in Massachusetts, helping operators get started, as Massachusetts is really the farthest along here. So taking that knowledge that we've learned and now helping to push that out into Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and hopefully Rhode Island soon as they start to get on board. But we can help with everything from, pro formas for initial operators, getting their chart of accounts and their books and records set up properly from the beginning, taxes, audits, reviews, the whole gamut that we can do for them.
Commissioner, tell us a little bit about the work that you do. I know we've had a record number of applications and your agency has been doing yeoman's work here. So tell us about what's going on and your role in it.
Sure, thank you. And great to be with such a great group of folks. So I joined the Department of Consumer Protection in August of last year, right around the time that the Social Equity Council first started meeting. As Adam mentioned, I am the chair of the council. So since the bill was signed last July, the Social Equity Council has been hard at work developing the processes and procedures to determine what a social equity applicant is and what is the criteria that's needed in order to verify that. We've also been trying to, get as much information as we possibly can out to applicants about the process in particular, as well as having, a series of webinars around access to capital. And I know Megan has been a huge, huge help to the Social Equity Council in terms of just providing that information, as well as Devin, who's with Green Check Verified. So it's been great to have these partners in this work because it really is an uphill climb. It's an uphill climb when you can't just walk into a traditional bank and get a loan, but it's also, and it's even harder of challenge for social equity applicants who may not have previously had access to that kind of capital. And so I'm grateful for those who are in this space that are willing to work with the social equity applicants, because at the end of the day, the bill was signed with an eye towards addressing the impact of the war on drugs on communities of color. And so I think we would be remiss if we did not make sure that the access to capital is one less barrier that they have to face in trying to get into this industry.
So I guess my next question is just at its most basic level, and I don't know, feel free to, anyone can answer this question, but just explain to some of our listeners sort of why are marijuana businesses having such difficulty getting a bank account?
Part of it is just the stigma of the fact that it is considered a controlled substance, a class 1 felony federally. And as a banker, we're always concerned about risk. I certainly don't want to be wearing stripes or orange, and haven't so far since 2014. So that's a good thing. But every bank and credit union has a different appetite for risk. But what we have seen is that, there are a lot more risky businesses than cannabis businesses that my commercial lenders try to lend to. So I think rather than just look at it as a whole, bankers have to really start looking at each case by case situation. How strong is the business? What have they got behind them for collateral? What are they trying to do? What's their business plan? And I just think a lot, I'm probably speaking for bankers, but I think a lot of them are just like, oh my God, this is scary. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I would echo what Lynn said. And again, we admire the work that she has done here in the state of Connecticut. You know, they were out there early as pioneers. We have hold cannabis banking boot camps once a month, and through that process, we've had over 900 different financial institutions, and I don't know how many 4,000 different people come through our cannabis banking boot camps, and we have 100 that are now on the platform. You may say, well, that's great, that's progress, but that's 800 who still haven't done it. And so, we really look at, the challenges. There's a lot of education that has to happen. Lynn talked about the education with FDIC and her board, et cetera. There's a lot of education that has to happen internally within a financial institution that this is not federally illegal. It is not codified anywhere that you cannot bank the cannabis industry, but people equate the plant with the banking activity. And so you have to dispel and disconnect those thoughts. But what it comes down to, and what we've learned, and we had this wrong in the beginning, I'll raise two hands, how can you do it? Can you do it? And why you would do it? And we had to turn that completely on its head and help financial institutions understand why they should bank the cannabis industry. And it can't just be fee income based. That pressure is going downward. It has to be about community support, supporting these businesses, supporting this industry, which is the fastest growing consumer packaged good industry nationwide, and providing the same level of access and services to legitimate state sanctioned businesses. You wouldn't put any other business through the hoops that, this industry has to go through. And as the deputy commissioner pointed out, for some folks that are just starting out that don't even have that baseline, don't make it harder. You don't make it harder. It's not that complicated when you break it down and you codify it and approach it from a programmatic perspective. Don't think of it as a project. Don't think of it as a specialty thing. Programmatically, like Lynn has done and others, programmatically take that approach as to how you're going to service this industry, and then scale your program up, and then decide what other products and services you want to offer. And there are FIs that are doing this at massive scale. And then there are some others that are just happy having that one dispensary client as a credit union or as a bank because they already had a relationship. They just want to stay above board with their examiners. That's fine too.
I appreciate you naming that it's not federally illegal, Kevin, because I think that is the sense that they're waiting for the Safe Banking Act to pass so that they feel a comfort level, because they feel somehow they're not allowed to until the federal government recognizes that. So, I'm grateful for that information, because now I can go and scream it from the mountaintops.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, you're spot on. I mean, a lot of the whole industry, right, is most of the problems that come around the industry are all, go back to just the stigma around it. And people have their different beliefs, and that's the same reason that we're having trouble with towns approving to have, dispensaries and cultivation in their town. And I've been to town meetings, and it's fascinating to hear the comments as if we were still, in like the 1970s or something. But people just are scared of what they don't know. And,
right.
And it's just truly the stigma. And as much as you need to educate the banks, you just need to educate communities over, the industry and what it truly is about, because people just have this idea in their mind of what it is. And it really couldn't be any farther from the truth. And as you said, it's the fastest growing industry. So you just can't deny it for too much longer.
Yeah, my understanding is that it creates some real risks. And I was curious to get sort of the group's reaction and maybe Commissioner Comer, your reaction to the public safety risk, right? When, businesses can't bank and deal in cash, largely in cash, that creates a public safety issue and need for security and security risks. And you've seen out west, there've been a lot of issues recently with theft and issues going across state lines and all of that. Is that a concern that state leaders are thinking of and planning? I know public safety isn't your agency's mission per se, but I just wanted to sort of see where that's at, what state leaders are thinking on that issue.
Sure. So, I mean, at the state level, the bill does include significant provisions around, how how the law enforcement entities in our state can be aware of this and address the issues. Because you're right, when you are a cash only business, you become a target. I think there was a hemp farmer who was recently in the news because he was saying his place keeps getting broken into because people are thinking that it's cannabis related and therefore he has significant cash on hand. So there are a number of law enforcement entities that are built into the bill to watch this. But I do think that we're going to have to pay more close attention, especially until people can make that transition from a cash only business to one where they can establish banks or accept credit cards, we're all going to have to be thinking about how do we keep both customers and workers safe.
I'll just pipe in for a moment and say that, as part of our program, we do site visits, obviously, on our cannabis-related businesses. And we have made it a point to bring some of our local legislators, selectmen, to the facilities because we think it's important for them to get an insider's view of what's happening versus, thinking of the Bob Marley days with dreadlocks and everything. That's not what this is anymore. And I have to give the Department of Consumer Protection 5 stars on what they did with a medical marijuana program here in Connecticut, because it is strict. It has parameters that everyone has to follow. And it'll be interesting to see, I understand the adult rec is, another animal, but it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out.
I think that's really wise what you're doing to outreach to the local elected leaders. And I had a visual of a split screen between Norm Needleman, your first selectman in Essex, and Bob Marley there for a minute, but which was pretty good. But so transitioning over, there's the banking side and being able to bank, and then there's the access to capital, which is sort of a different and tougher issue. And my understanding is that this lack of access to capital really creates an increased cost for these businesses because the capital becomes more expensive for them to access. Maybe I'll open this one to Megan because you're the accountant, so you're seeing what businesses are actually spending for this, and especially dealing with startups. Wondering if you have a perspective on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge challenge to early operators, and even the larger operators, is just the overall access to capital and what that does to their bottom line. Because it's already federally legal, you can't take normal deductions like a traditional business. So your tax gross margin of what you're paying is already much higher than a traditional business. Now you add on to it that you have to go to some type of outside financing, getting investors, getting some type of alternative financing. You're not able to go to a bank. So your interest rates that you're paying are that much higher as well. So it just keeps reducing the profitability of these early operators, and it makes it very difficult for them to get up and established if they don't have their own self-funding and they've got to actually go out and seek that capital. So it's an absolute challenge. I think it's something that all of our early applicants are going to face, especially on the social equity side, really trying to figure this out and get them access to that capital so that they can get their doors open and not be paying astronomical interest rates. I mean, we've seen them as high as 20% on some deals, which is just, Kevin's seen it higher. I mean, it's crazy to think of signing a loan for that amount of money, but when you have no other choices, you're backed into a corner.
Yeah, I've met some really interesting people in this space, Megan, at some of your events and other industry events in the area. But yes, high interest rates are a common feature. Kevin, you were raising your hand there. What's the highest you've seen? You've got us all curious now.
Well, there was a publicly traded company. I'll save the name because I mistakenly bought the stock at the IPO, so I'm embarrassed by it. But it was a publicly traded company that took out a 6-month loan for $50 million at 60%. They're publicly traded. They had to disclose that with the 10% kicker on the back end if they missed it. I mean, it makes no sense. But one of the very, very interesting things that's going on right now, and again, because of how our approach and what we do, we're seeing lending become the tip of the spear for inquiries from financial institutions as to why they should bank the cannabis industry. because the cost of capital is increasing dramatically, and it's going to go up again in June, it's going to go up again in July. The Fed's already raising their hands just how much. And you look at the cost of capital, and you look at the industry of cannabis right outside all these financial institutions' doors. This is fee-based deposit dollars. They're getting deposit dollars and paid for them versus having to go to the Fed or otherwise to find this capital. So they see that. And then when the FIs realize they have the level of visibility and depository control over these accounts, they're creating the best opportunity for any commercial loan in their entire portfolio because they get to see the health and trajectory of that business day in and day out. And so what we're seeing is a lot of FIs that are taking cannabis businesses on, they're rewriting that early paper, that expensive paper that had warrant coverage, et cetera. They're wiping that all out. They're rewriting it at a more reasonable rate. It's still a little higher than conventional. There is risk. You can't seize a license. You can't do anything with it. Every state has different rules, but we're seeing more opportunity for lending. And then you have states like New York. Sorry, I got to give them a little shout out here. You know, they created that $200 million fund for social equity folks to participate. And we're super happy to be helping enable that through all that application and onboarding process so that they can properly vet those businesses and then follow them operationally early on. So you're seeing the tide shift a little bit, but again, you know, as you started with, Adam, and for all of us, it's so slow.
Yeah, and Kevin, thanks for providing that transition. I think this might be a good time to kind of ask the question. We've been sort of outlining the problem and highlighting the issues with banking and finance, but I know the state of Connecticut also created a fund and is providing opportunity and access to capital for social equity applicants. I'm wondering, Commissioner, if you could tell us a little bit about sort of some of the steps the state's taken initially, some steps you might be sort of considering moving forward. And I know you're constrained by what the legislature passes, so you can't just create the law yourself and implement it. And then also as a follow-up after that, wondering if Lynn, you and Kevin and Megan can sort of chime in on what the private sector, you know, what steps the private sector has taken recently or might be pursuing as well.
Sure. So the legislation allotted for $50 million in bond funding that would be available for a host of things, including supporting applicants with access to capital. We requested and received $10 million of that $50 million, and we will be providing low interest loans through the Department of Economic and Community Development for those applicants to help. Once they receive their provisional licenses, they'll be able to come to us for assistance in that regard. And that is in recognition of exactly what Kevin and Lynn and Megan have outlined, is just the challenges associated with accessing capital. In addition to which, we are sort of beating the drums for entities within the state to also provide support. The state legislature passed a fund that is specifically designed to assist impacted communities. Not just by cannabis, but just, you know, the areas where they have been marginalized and underrepresented. And so we're hoping to access some of those funds. DECD got its own pot of money. So we really do see this as, you know, let's search under every couch cushion available to see what we can get to support these folks. Because again, recognizing the challenges with accessing capital, nobody should have to pay 60% on anything. That's just unconscionable. But I also know that there is going to be a predatory aspect of this lending. And so the more we can create resources that are not that, the better we will be able to serve the social equity applicants and those who need it most.
What can the private sector do? Is there anything banks or accountants or financial lending institutions can do to be a part of the solution?
Yeah, and it's a balance because as a bank, yes, there's the interest rate risk that we've all talked about. So are they charged a little bit more? Of course they are, just because of the risk involved in the cannabis industry and the amount of reporting that we have to do. I think Kevin, and Megan will assert that there is another layer of work that we do have to do to bank the cannabis group. But as far as supporting them from a capital perspective, we take the approach that, we're going to look at it on a case-by-case basis, on the strength of the borrower, on the strength of the business plan, which is probably where Megan is going to come into play. Because in looking at the applicants who have come through our doors so far, looking just for the license, some of them don't seem to have a clear plan. So that's what we're going to be looking for, same as any other industry out there.
Great.
It goes back to the data, right? Lynn talked about, do they have a plan? Do they have financials? Do they have an active lease? So, the application process is pretty strict. God bless you guys and having to review all those applications. So, but then, the winners are going to come out, and then they're still going to have the next set of hurdles of getting access to that capital, making sure that they can open the business. What's that runway look like? If anybody's ever opened a business, it never goes as planned. So additional expense, et cetera. And then, how do you keep it going? How do you keep it moving? And these businesses are brutal. I always say this is worse than opening a restaurant, because you got to be there early. You got to take everything out of the safe. You got to get everything set up. At the end of the day, you got to put it back. And then, you're exhausted. And at the end of the day, you just want to go home, and you don't think about, well, I still need to get a bank. I got to follow up on a loan. I have to get insurance. Days turn into weeks to months, et cetera. And before you know it, you've got a big pile on your hands. So anything that all of us can do individually to ease that burden collectively for them, I think is very, very important.
So if I'm starting a new business, I put in my lottery application. I could always hire a financial consultant expert in the industry to be helpful, a group like Green Check Verified. I could go to Essex Savings Bank and apply, but I better have my business plan in order and my financials put together. And then if I get a license, I can apply and call up the commissioner and see if she can help me get a low interest loan through DECD. Okay, so we'll call the Commissioner of Economic and Community Development and Commissioner Lehman. We'll tell people we'll put his number up on the screen. Call him and ask him for the low interest loan so that people don't get charged 60%. And then all of us need to encourage the private sector to get more active in the industry and to be more of a part of the solution. This has been great. And if you're looking for a good accountant, if you're lucky enough to get through all of that, you could hire Megan. But you guys have offered such great perspective today on a really important issue facing every business in this industry right now. And I just wanted to, before we leave, I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to sort of offer any parting thoughts. Do you have any advice for businesses that are just getting started? Any policy recommendations that you think state leaders should be pursuing? So any of the above or all the above or none of the above, but just your parting thoughts, would love to get it. So we'll start with Kevin.
Well, we talked about this at the beginning. If you're a financial institution and you're looking at these cannabis businesses, do your homework, understand that you can legally do this, you can safely do this, you can do it at scale, you can do it with compliance, and they end up being fiercely loyal clients for you. And the radiation effect of having them as a client becomes very, very real. And if you're waiting for the Safe Banking Act and you think it's going to be easier because of that, you are woefully and sadly mistaken. It is going to get more complicated. Washington cannot help themselves. God bless them too, but they're going to make this more complicated. There's going to be more rules and regulations. And so the Safe Banking Act is not the silver bullet that a lot of people sit back and think it's going to be. If you're looking at it, dig in, figure out if you really want to do it, and then figure out how you would go about doing it. But support your communities.
I would just underscore what Kevin said about having a plan, and I wholeheartedly agree that the SAFE Act is not going to be the wish that every banker wants, because again, it's still a class 1 felony, no matter what they say. So each bank has got to decide whether they're going to take the leap and bank this industry or not. And as someone said to me, with the adult rec coming along, it's really looking more like a kind of a liquor store situation than anything else because it's proclaimed legal in Connecticut. So, forget about whether you drink or you don't drink, or you smoke or you don't smoke, or you eat the edible or you don't eat the edible. It's about whether you should bank the business. And again, we'll look at businesses on a case-by-case basis in our market area and make the decision from there.
Yeah, I would absolutely say, to early applicants is just to be proactive in getting your financials together, whether it's going to be for going for financing, getting pro forma financials before you're up and running of what you think your business is going to be making, what the value of your business is, and get that done by somebody who's qualified that can actually get you underlying data to support that, so that when you sit in front of your banker and they say, well, where did you get that number from? And it's not, well, I heard from my friend Joe that I could make $100,000 a day. You have actually solid data points behind it. The other point too is a lot of investors, either private or banks, are getting more savvy in that they're actually asking for either audited financials, reviewed financials from an independent accountant. So make sure that you understand that. And I think that's a really good thing for the industry, because most of these businesses have gone on for so long without getting any type of outside review of their financials. But at the end of the day, be proactive with your books and records, get them set up from the right way from the start, and it's going to make your life a whole lot easier as you move forward with your business.
So there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that is definitely the case with pursuing this type of business. One of the things that I found really encouraging is the extent to which entities are willing to provide support and provide assistance pro bono. As I mentioned at the start of this, Devin Schlape, who's with Green Check Verified, has participated on a number of panels providing information, as has Megan. And even to the extent of there are some law firms who are willing to help applicants pro bono. I think that, there's this perception that it's going to cost all of this money just to have a good accountant, to have a good lawyer. And in some cases, it may not be free, but it is definitely worth the investment at the front end, because to everyone's point, what you don't want to do is get in front of a lender or even try to pursue this license and you don't have your act together.
So Commissioner Comer, thank you so much for joining us today. Megan Budd, Lynn Giroux, Kevin Hart, we really appreciate your time today. This has been very informational and helpful to our members and to the public. And to everyone tuning in today, thanks for tuning in. Really want to thank everyone for their time today, and look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
Be good.
Thanks.
Come on.
Thanks.
Thank you.